WFYI podcasts are brought to you by Visit Bloomington. With over 350 restaurants to choose from, Bloomington, Indiana is truly a food lover's paradise. Go to visitbloomington.com to discover what suits your taste.
This is WFYI News Now. It's February 12th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, more access to care for Indy residents living with HIV. Governor Holcomb sends members of the Indiana National Guard to the southern border. How the Republican primary ballot for governor is shaping up. And Carmel's mayor withdraws from the United States Heartland China Association.
In his letter, Banks called for Finkam to disentangle Carmel from the Chinese Communist Party.
Those stories coming up. But first, former Indianapolis mayoral candidate Jefferson Shreve has filed to run for Congress in Indiana's 6th district. The Republican businessman joins at least 4 other GOP candidates vying for the seat currently held by Greg Pence, who is not seeking re-election. Indiana's primary election is May 7th. And more Indianapolis residents living with HIV will have access to care. Darian Benson reports Damien Center expanded financial assistance eligibility requirements for patients earning less than $72,900 a year.
The expanded assistance enables people living at 500% of the federal poverty level to access services like medical care, copay assistance, and mental health services at Damien Center. Individuals can also receive case management services, pharmacy discounts, and food assistance. In a news release, Damien Center says expanding the eligibility criteria to include patients with higher incomes will break down financial barriers that prevent individuals from seeking care. Previously, individuals were required to earn less than $40,770 to receive financial assistance, which is 300% of the federal poverty level. To learn more, go to wfyi.org/news. I'm Darian Benson.
Governor Eric Holcomb is sending members of the Indiana National Guard to the southern border of the United States as part of an ongoing showdown between the state of Texas and the federal government over the flow of migrants into the country. Holcomb visited the border last week, along with a dozen other Republican governors. In a statement last Friday announcing the deployment of 50 National Guard members, Holcomb accused the federal government of negligence. He says the constant supply of killer drugs over an open U.S. border will harm Hoosiers and the state's ongoing struggle with substance use disorder. This is not the first time the Indiana National Guard has been deployed to the region. More than 300 served on the southern border over the last 3 years, but they were part of federal missions. It appears Indiana's Republican primary ballot for governor this year will have 6 candidates. Brandon Smith reports on what the field looks like after last week's filing deadline.
The open race for governor has attracted some big names. The candidates who filed on the GOP side are U.S. Senator Mike Braun, former State Secretary of Commerce Brad Chambers, Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch, former Indiana Economic Development Corporation Chief Eric Doden, former State Attorney General Curtis Hill, and Jamie Rittenauer. The surprising name on that list is the last one, Rittenauer, who describes herself as a believer in Jesus Christ, a proud wife, and mother of 5. Braun, Chambers, Crouch, and Doden each entered 2024 with more than $1 million in their campaign accounts. Hill raised more than $350,000 last year, and Rittenauer entered this year with less than $15,000 in her account. Early in-person voting for the primary begins April 9th. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
And for our final story today, Carmel Mayor Sue Finkam formally withdrew from the United States Heartland China Association in a letter to the organization last week. As Ben Thorpe reports, the move comes after Indiana Congressman and Senate candidate Jim Banks sent a letter to the mayor in January asking her to end an agreement with one of Carmel's sister cities.
The Chinese city of Xiangyang is one of 7 sister cities for Carmel. The agreements between cities aim to build relationships and connections in the international community. In his letter, Banks called for Finkam to disentangle Carmel from the Chinese Communist Party. The letter followed a report in the Washington Post about a visit to China by Carmel's previous mayor, James Brainerd. The article outlined an effort by China to influence U.S. policy by courting mayors in the Midwest. Mayor Finkam determined not to renew the city's membership with the USHCA, but cited the annual $25,000 membership fees as the primary reason. Withdrawing from the USHCA will not directly impact the city's sister city agreement with Shangyang. The USHCA did not respond to our request for comment. I'm Ben Thorpe.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Darian Benson, Daudelin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Abriana Herron. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.